In the year 2442, humanity was caught in the middle of a fierce war against the Xanthians, a race of technologically advanced and highly ruthless alien warriors. The Xanthians had swiftly conquered countless worlds, driven by their cold logic and relentless pursuit of dominance. With no room for compassion or mercy, their soldiers were engineered for one purpose: war. On the front lines of this galactic conflict stood Dr. Lena Hayes, a brilliant human medic whose only goal was to save lives, even when surrounded by the chaos of battle. Lena was part of a small but elite human medical unit, entrusted with the nearly impossible task of tending to the wounded and dying in a war that seemed endless and unyielding. The battle on the planet of Xanthion had been long and brutal. For days, the human forces had fought fiercely to hold their ground against the overwhelming alien forces. The Xanthions, using their superior weaponry and tactical intelligence, had pushed the human army back to a small, heavily fortified position. Lena's team had been working around the clock, performing triage and stabilizing soldiers, doing everything they could to keep the human forces in the fight. But as the hours passed, the situation grew dire. The humans were outnumbered, and their resources were running out. Communication lines had been severed, and they were cut off from reinforcements. In the midst of this chaos, Lena found herself separated from her unit during a violent counterattack by the Xanthion forces. The sound of explosions echoed in the air, and smoke filled the sky. She tried to reach her fellow medics, but the battlefield had become a maze of fire and destruction. Her heart pounded in her chest as she sprinted through the ruins, dodging blasts and falling debris. The Xanthions, relentless in their pursuit of victory, had no intention of letting her escape. She stumbled upon a small group of soldiers trying to regroup, but before she could reach them, the ground beneath her feet shook violently, and a group of Xanthion warriors descended upon her. The aliens were merciless, quickly overpowering her and binding her with advanced restraints. Lena's heart raced as she realized she was captured. Her medical expertise had made her a target, but she had never imagined that the Xanthions would take such a personal interest in her. They saw her as nothing more than a tool, someone they could use to further their war effort. The cold, emotionless eyes of the Xanthion soldiers bore into her as they dragged her away from the battle. As she was transported to a hidden military base deep within the planet's mountainous regions, Lena tried to remain calm. She knew that her chances of survival would depend on her ability to think and adapt quickly. The Xanthions were a highly advanced species, but they lacked the one thing that made humans unique: empathy. It was this very quality that Lena believed could be their downfall. The Xanthions saw war as a game of numbers and strategies, but Lena had seen firsthand how humans could fight with heart and ingenuity, something the Xanthions didn't understand. Upon arrival at the alien base, Lena was immediately thrust into the heart of their medical facilities. The Xanthions were far ahead of humanity in many areas, but their medical practices were crude, focused only on the efficient use of resources. Lena was forced to work in a lab filled with alien machinery and medical tools that she didn't fully understand. The Xanthions demanded that she treat their injured soldiers, but Lena, ever the professional, noticed the errors in their approach. Their methods were barbaric by human standards, with little regard for the long-term effects of their treatments. Instead of following their orders blindly, Lena began to work quietly, using her knowledge of both human and alien anatomy to adapt their techniques. She carefully altered their medical procedures, saving lives in ways the Xanthions couldn't comprehend. The aliens were perplexed at how quickly some of their soldiers recovered, but they didn't know that Lena was using a blend of human medical science and subtle, innovative techniques that they had never seen before. Lena knew that she was playing a dangerous game. She had to walk a fine line between helping the Xanthions and finding a way to escape. As she healed their warriors, she also observed their technology, their biology, and their military strategies. Slowly, Lena began to form a plan a plan that would not only allow her to escape, but also turn the tide of the war in humanity's favor. She would need to use every ounce of her intelligence, her medical expertise, and the knowledge she had gained from both human and alien worlds to achieve it. But one thing was certain. The Xanthions had no idea what they had unleashed by capturing her. They thought they had a tool for their war machine, but they had no idea that they were about to face a force far more dangerous than anything they had ever encountered. A human mind fueled by survival, compassion, and the will to win. Lena's time in the Xanthion military base was taking its toll, but it was also transforming her. She had grown increasingly adept at healing the Xanthion soldiers, impressing even their harshest commanders with her skills. Each life she saved added to her growing reputation among the Xanthions, but it also made her more dangerous in their eyes. They began to see her less as a prisoner and more as an asset, a human capable of healing their soldiers with an efficiency and precision that even their most advanced medical experts couldn't match. Their respect for her was grudging at first, but soon it became undeniable. She had earned a place in their system, one she could never have imagined when she was first captured. Yet, as she worked, Lena also grew more aware of the true nature of the Xanthions. They were warriors through and through, calculating, cold, and completely without empathy. Their battlefield tactics were brutal, but their treatment of their own injured soldiers was even worse. The Xanthions valued efficiency over everything, and the weak were seen as expendable. The soldiers who failed to recover after treatment were discarded without hesitation, their lives deemed unimportant. Lena knew that to the Xanthions, she was just another tool, a tool that could heal their soldiers, but not someone they would ever truly value. As the days passed, she became more and more determined to use her position to her advantage. She would play their game, but she would do so on her terms. While the Xanthions were focused on using her to patch up their warriors, Lena was secretly crafting something far more dangerous, something that could tip the scales of the war. The Xanthions had no idea that she had been studying their biology, carefully observing their weaknesses and strengths. She had gained access to a treasure trove of alien medical texts, but more importantly, she had studied the viruses that the Xanthions relied on for their various medical treatments. Their bodies were resistant to many diseases, but their immune systems weren't invincible. Lena knew that the Xanthions' over-reliance on their advanced technology and biology left them vulnerable in ways they didn't understand. Using her deep knowledge of human biology and the alien viruses she had studied, Lena devised a new kind of medicine, a virus that could rapidly enhance human resilience and adaptability without causing harm. Her unique human genetic makeup, combined with the alien viruses she had carefully manipulated, created a powerful bioweapon. Lena's creation wasn't designed to kill. It was designed to make humans stronger, faster, and more adaptable in the face of any challenge. It was the ultimate enhancement, a virus that would make her people more than capable of standing against the Xanthions. Lena began to introduce this new virus into the wounded Xanthion soldiers she was treating. At first it was subtle, just a few doses mixed into the treatments she administered. She carefully watched for any changes, looking for signs that the virus was working as intended. The results were immediate and startling. Soldiers who had been on the brink of death began to recover with astonishing speed, their bodies showing signs of enhanced strength and stamina. The Xanthions, puzzled by this unexpected turn of events, began to see Lena not only as a healer, but as something far more valuable, a living weapon capable of enhancing their soldiers' abilities in ways they had never dreamed of. But Lena's motives were far from aligned with theirs. She wasn't healing the Xanthions out of some misplaced sense of compassion. She was manipulating their biology, using their own weapons against them. Each dose of the virus made the Xanthion soldiers stronger, but it also pushed her closer to her goal, an army of enhanced humans, ready to fight back with unmatched resilience. She knew that once she perfected the virus, It could be the key to winning the war. It could make humans far stronger than the Xanthions ever anticipated. What they didn't realize was that Lena was only using their technology to perfect a weapon of her own, a weapon that would flip the balance of power in the galaxy. As Lena continued her secret work, she felt a mix of satisfaction and dread. She knew the risks of what she was doing. If the Xanthions discovered her plan, it would mean certain death. But the possibility of turning the tide of the war, of using her knowledge to give humanity a fighting chance, was too important. Her captors thought they had control, but they were blind to the storm she was quietly building. Lena wasn't just a prisoner anymore. She had become something else entirely, a force that would change the course of the war and ultimately the fate of the galaxy. The Xanthions had no idea what they had unleashed by trusting her. The tides were turning, and soon Lena would be ready to unleash the full power of her creation. Lena had spent months meticulously planning, waiting for the right moment to make her move. Every day, every procedure, every conversation with the Xanthion medical officers had been a calculated step in her ultimate escape. She had learned their routines, understood their weaknesses, and patiently bided her time. The Xanthions had grown comfortable with her presence, too comfortable, underestimating her at every turn. But Lena knew their arrogance would be their undoing. The time had come to make them pay for their mistake. In the dead of night, with the hum of alien machinery filling the air and the usual guards in place, Lena set her plan into motion. She had spent days researching their supply lines, where the Xanthions kept their medical and combat supplies, how they distributed their resources, and which pathways were the most vulnerable. The Xanthion military, with all its advanced technology, had overlooked one simple truth. The human mind was capable of creating chaos in ways that machines could never predict. Lena had already figured out how to release a potent neurotoxin into their supply system. It was a small amount, just enough to incapacitate the guards without killing them, leaving them disoriented and unable to stop her. With a steady hand and a sharp mind, Lena worked quickly, tampering with the system that powered the medical facility. The neurotoxin spread silently through the air vents, and within minutes, the first signs of success appeared. The guards in the hallways staggered, clutching their heads, confused by the sudden fog that had invaded their minds. Some collapsed immediately, while others struggled to stay on their feet. Lena moved with quiet precision, slipping through the chaos undetected, her heart racing in her chest. It was now or never. She darted down a series of narrow corridors, heading toward the exit. She could hear the muffled sounds of the Xanthion military reacting to the disturbance, but by the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. The moment Lena slipped out of the facility, she was free. The night air of the alien world felt strangely refreshing against her skin as she ran deeper into the wilderness. The dense forest of Xanthion was unlike anything she had ever encountered, a place filled with strange sounds and alien wildlife that seemed to watch her with unblinking eyes. She didn't know where she was going, but that didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was putting as much distance between herself and her captors as possible. As Lena moved through the rugged terrain, she encountered something unexpected, a group of human prisoners, scattered and desperate, just like she had once been. They were survivors, captured during earlier skirmishes, and now living in the shadows of the Xanthion world, hidden away from the constant surveillance of their captors. The moment Lena saw them, she knew what she had to do. With her enhanced medical knowledge, she treated their wounds, using the skills she had perfected during her time with the Xanthions. She applied the virus that had given her strength to their bodies, helping them heal faster and become stronger than they ever thought possible. The prisoners watched her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Some of them had heard the rumors, the whispers of the most feared healer alive, who had turned the tide for the Xanthion soldiers. Now they saw her in the flesh, a living legend who had escaped their grasp. Lena didn't tell them her full story, not yet. but she knew that the seeds of something powerful were being planted. She could see the hope in their eyes, the spark of resistance that had long been extinguished in their hearts. It was time to build a new kind of army, one that wouldn't just fight back. It would strike with precision and strength, with the power of someone who had seen both sides of the war. Word of Lena's escape and her growing group spread quickly. Whispers carried across the enemy lines, and the Xantheon military began to realize the gravity of their mistake. They had underestimated her. The human who had once been a mere medic, a healer, was now a force they could not comprehend. Lena had become both a savior and a weapon, a symbol of hope for the oppressed and a nightmare for the Xantheons. But Lena wasn't content with just surviving. She had seen too much, learned too much. She was no longer just a healer, she was a strategist, a leader. And she had no intention of staying hidden for long. The time would come when she would take the fight to the Xantheon's doorstep. But for now, she would build her resistance, grow her numbers, and make sure that when the final battle came, it would be one they would never forget. The Xantheons thought they had captured the most valuable thing in the galaxy, Lena Hayes. What they didn't realize was that she was far more dangerous to them free than she ever was as their prisoner. The human resistance, once a ragtag group of frightened prisoners, was now growing into something far more formidable, and it was all thanks to Lena's unique blend of medical expertise and strategic leadership. The alien world of Xantheon had no idea what was coming. Lena had spent countless hours refining her methods, teaching the resistance not only how to fight, but how to heal. Her deep knowledge of both human and Xantheon medical practices gave her a critical advantage. She used the alien viruses she had studied to enhance the resilience of her fighters, allowing them to recover from wounds faster, endure more pain, and push beyond the limits they once thought impossible. She taught them how to harness their own body's potential, to rebuild their strength after each skirmish, to fight harder, longer, and smarter. Her training was rigorous, but every soldier who passed through her care came out more than just a fighter. They became a warrior capable of standing against the might of the Xantheon forces. The first signs of the Resistance's growing strength were subtle, small victories in skirmishes. The occasional Xantheon soldier returning to their base with more injuries than expected. The Xantheons, accustomed to their superiority, barely noticed at first. They thought of humans as weak, fragile, and unworthy. After all, they had seen humanity as little more than prey or tools to be used in their conquest of the galaxy. But Lena's influence began to change that perception, little by little. The humans she treated were healing faster than the Xantheons could understand. They had more stamina, more endurance. When they were injured, they recovered with an unnatural speed. And when they returned to battle, they were stronger than ever, much stronger than the Xantheons had expected. As the resistance continued to grow, Lena's methods spread. Her reputation, already known among the prisoners, began to leak into the wider war. Whispers of the most feared healer alive became legends in the Xantheon ranks. They didn't know how to explain the rapid changes occurring within the human forces. Soldiers who were once easily defeated were now felling Xantheons with ease. The Xantheons had always prided themselves on their superior strength and battle prowess, but against humans who could endure their attacks and recover in moments, the battle became far less one-sided. The Xantheons, more accustomed to dominating, their enemies, found themselves losing control. Their soldiers, once filled with pride and unshakable confidence, began to falter. They didn't understand why the human resistance was thriving. Their soldiers, better equipped, better trained, and more numerous, should have been crushing the humans. Instead, morale plummeted. The Xantheons couldn't understand why their highly advanced technology and brutal tactics were no longer enough. Their soldiers, once proud and fierce, now hesitated. They looked over their shoulders in fear. They saw humans fighting back with ferocity and determination, and they realized something was wrong. but they couldn't pinpoint the cause. They couldn't understand that it wasn't just the humans' will to fight. It was their enhanced ability to survive, to heal, and to recover. Lena, however, knew that the real weapon was not just their physical prowess. It was their ability to adapt. The more she studied the Xantheon forces, the more she realized that their technological superiority couldn't replace the human mind's ingenuity. The Xantheons had brute force, but the humans now had resilience, adaptability, and the knowledge to use those qualities to their advantage. They fought smarter, using tactics that had once been impossible for them. They targeted weak points, exploited vulnerabilities, and turned the Xantheons' own strategy against them. As the months passed, the human resistance transformed from a handful of survivors into a full-fledged army. Lena had become not just a healer, but a leader, one who inspired unwavering loyalty in her soldiers. They were no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting for a future. They were fighting for their home, for their families, and for each other. And under Lena's guidance, they were beginning to win. The tide of the war was shifting. Slowly but surely, the Xantheons' grip on the galaxy was loosening. They still had the numbers, the technology, and the firepower, but they no longer had the one thing that had made them unstoppable, the belief that they were invincible. The human resistance had become something the Xantheons couldn't predict, couldn't understand, and couldn't control. It wasn't just about strength anymore. It was about survival, and the humans had learned how to survive better than anyone ever thought possible. Lena watched as her soldiers, now a well-trained and determined force, fought with the kind of bravery and skill that left the Xantheons reeling. But even as they celebrated their victories, Lena knew the war was far from over. The Xantheons were not finished, and their pride would drive them to desperate measures. But for the first time since her capture, Lena felt a glimmer of hope. She was no longer just surviving. She was leading an unstoppable force, and with each victory, they were inching closer to victory over the Xantheons. The war was far from won, but the Xantheons had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated humanity's will to fight. And now, they would pay the price. The war had reached a boiling point. The Xantheon High Command, now desperate to crush the growing human resistance, had unleashed their most dangerous hunters to capture Lena. These elite warriors were their finest, skilled in tracking and elimination. They had been given one mission: find Lena and bring her back, dead or alive. But each time they ventured into the wilds of Xantheon, Lena was always one step ahead. Her knowledge of the terrain, combined with the guerrilla tactics she had learned during her time as a prisoner, allowed her to outsmart them at every turn. She used the environment to her advantage, setting traps, using the natural landscape to conceal her movements, and ambushing them from hidden positions. It was becoming clear to the Xantheons that Lena was more than just a prisoner who had escaped. She was a strategic genius, and she had become a symbol of resistance that could not be silenced. But the High Command's frustration was growing. The loss of their best hunters was a humiliation they could not ignore. It became clear that Lena's capture was no longer just a military objective. It had become a matter of pride. The Xantheon military, with all its power and technology, couldn't capture a single human. They had underestimated her, and now they were paying the price. The High Command ordered a full-scale push to find and neutralize Lena. They believed that if they could control her, they would crush the human resistance once and for all. But the more they pushed, the more Lena pushed back. The resistance was swelling, and each time they failed to capture her, the human fighters grew bolder, more determined, and more dangerous. It was in this moment of desperation that the Xantheon military sent their greatest weapon, General Arath. A towering figure, both in strength and cunning, Arath was known for his ruthless tactics and near-legendary skill in combat. He was the one the Xantheon High Command trusted to deal with threats that others couldn't. His belief in the superiority of the Xantheons was absolute. To him, humans were weak and fragile, easily broken, easily dominated. The idea that one human could defy his army was a direct challenge to everything he had fought for. Arath's arrival on the battlefield marked the beginning of the end for Lena. At least that's what the Xanthions believed. They thought that with his strength and experience, Arath would be the one to end the human threat for good. But Lena had other plans. She knew the moment Arath was sent that the war had reached its climax. This would not just be another battle. It would be the ultimate confrontation. She had studied Arath's every move, observed his tactics, and understood his mind. His arrogance, his belief in his own invincibility, would be his downfall. Lena's strength was not in brute force. It was in her ability to adapt, to use, her intelligence to outthink her enemies. She had learned how to use alien biology against the Xanthions before, and she intended to do so again. The battle between Lena and General Arath was a clash of wills. Arath charged with unrelenting fury, his massive frame bearing down on her with the force of a crushing storm. His tactics were brutal, each strike meant to obliterate anything in its path. But Lena was ready. She dodged, countered, and used her knowledge of his movements to her advantage. Every time he thought he had her cornered, she slipped away, leaving him frustrated and enraged. But then Lena turned the tide. She knew that Arath's strength was his greatest weapon, but it was also his greatest weakness. In the heat of the battle, as Arath swung his massive blade with deadly precision, Lena injected him with a viral agent, a modification of the very alien virus she had once used to enhance the resistance. It was designed not to kill, but to incapacitate, to drain his strength and leave him vulnerable. The effect was immediate. Arath's enormous form faltered as the virus took hold, his muscles locking up, his energy draining away. The powerful general who had once believed himself invincible now struggled against an enemy he could neither fight nor outrun. With Arath incapacitated, Lena didn't hesitate. She moved with the precision of a trained warrior, landing a swift blow to his exposed neck. The giant general fell to the ground, defeated and humiliated. The message was clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated. In that moment, Lena had done more than just defeat a Xanthion commander. She had shattered their belief in their own invincibility. The Xanthion military, watching from a distance, couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Arath, their greatest warrior, had been brought low by a single human, a healer, a strategist, and a leader. Lena's victory sent a shockwave through the Xanthion forces. The humans they had once seen as weak and insignificant were now a force to be reckoned with. And for the first time in the war, the Xanthions began to realize they were not the ones in control. The tide was turning, and Lena's message was loud and clear. The human resistance would not be crushed. It was only growing stronger. The Xanthions had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. After the fall of General Arath, the Xanthion Empire began to crumble. What had once seemed like an invincible force, a brutal and technologically superior species, was now on the brink of defeat. The ripple effect of Arath's loss was catastrophic, reverberating throughout the Xanthion military. The morale of their soldiers was shattered, and with each passing day, their once iron grip on their conquered territories weakened. In their desperation, the Xanthions tried to regroup, sending more forces to quell the rising tide of human resistance, but they found themselves outmatched. Every battle, every skirmish, only brought them closer to their downfall. Lena Hayes, the woman they had once captured and underestimated, had become the symbol of humanity's resilience and the Xanthion's greatest nightmare. Known now as the Healer of Death, Lena's influence grew beyond the battlefield. It wasn't just her medical prowess that made her legendary. It was her ability to see the bigger picture, her strategic mind that had turned the tide of war. Under her guidance, Humanity had learned to fight, not just with strength, but with cunning. Lena used her deep understanding of medicine, biology, and warfare to develop new ways to strengthen and heal her soldiers, making them more capable of enduring the brutal alien forces. Her unique blend of knowledge had made the human resistance stronger than ever before. What had once been seen as a group of desperate survivors was now a force that the Xanthions feared. Every victory Lena secured for humanity was not just a win in battle. It was a step toward proving that humans had the potential to be more than what the Xanthions had ever imagined. As the war neared its conclusion, Lena became more than just a commander. She became a symbol, an icon. The healer of death was a paradox. She was a savior, yet her actions had cost the Xanthions more than they could ever have anticipated. Her ability to heal was not limited to physical wounds. She had healed humanity's sense of fear and doubt. She had shown her people that they were capable of greatness, even in the face of the greatest odds. The story of Lena Hayes spread across the galaxy like wildfire, inspiring not only the human resistance, but others who had been under the Xanthions' rule. Her name became synonymous with defiance and hope. What had once been a scattered, ragtag group of prisoners and survivors was now a formidable force, one that had forced an entire empire to its knees. As the final battle loomed on the horizon, the Xanthions knew they were fighting for their very survival. They had underestimated the humans, and now they would pay the price. But Lena, though she had been the one to guide humanity to this point, knew that the fight was not just for victory. It was for a future. With each victory she led, she was not only securing a future for humanity, but reshaping the way the universe viewed them. Once thought to be weak, the humans were now a species that demanded respect. The Xanthions had tried to conquer the galaxy, but in doing so, they had unknowingly awakened something far stronger than they had anticipated. They had awakened humanity's will to survive, to adapt, and to fight back. In the final days of the war, as the Xanthion Empire crumbled and their forces scattered, Lena stood as a testament to everything humanity had achieved. She had been captured, tortured, and forced to heal enemies who saw her as nothing more than a tool. But in the end, she had become their greatest adversary. She had reshaped the course of history, not just by healing wounds, but by healing the very idea of what humanity was capable of. Her leadership, her unbreakable spirit, and her refusal to bow to oppression had turned the tides of a galactic war. She had shown the universe that humanity was not weak, not insignificant, and they would no longer be underestimated. When the war ended, the universe would never be the same. Humanity, once seen as the underdog, now stood tall among the stars. Lena's name lived on, not just in the victories she had led, but in the legacy she had left behind. The healer who had been captured and made to heal her enemies had become the greatest warrior humanity had ever known. Her story would be told for generations, a beacon of hope and strength. She had not just healed physical wounds, she had healed the very rift between humanity's potential and the universe's understanding of strength. And in doing so, she had made humanity a force to be reckoned with. As the years passed, Lena Hayes became more than just a name. She became an immortal symbol of what it meant to fight for survival, for freedom, and for the future, no matter the cost. Humanity was no longer a race to be feared. They were a force to be respected and admired. And Lena's legacy, the legacy of the healer of death, would forever be remembered as the catalyst that changed the course of history.